Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with jazz vocalist and composer Sara Serpa. We caught up with her in Portugal on June 11, 2020 to talk about this COVID-19 world and the new music she is putting out during a pandemic and racial upheaval in America. Her CD is called Recognition, Music for a Silent Film that came out on June 5th, 2020. Her gifts as a composer and vocalist are fused with the talents featuring Mark Turner, David Virelles, and Zeena Parkins. She came to America for the Beklee College of Music in Boston and has gone on to travel the world and etch deep trails in the jazz strata. Get to know her.
Thanks for taking a minute for Neon Jazz.
My pleasure.
So
Thank you for having me.
Oh, yeah, you bet. My pleasure. Where exactly are you located in the world?
Right now I'm in Portugal, in the south of Portugal.
Okay. How's everything in Portugal?
I mean, I'm in self-quarantine, so I'm in the middle of the country. I haven't seen anybody. I'm just isolating. So things are calm here.
Just kind of start with, obviously, we're in the midst of a global pandemic with COVID-19. So before we get to the new album, I want to ask you, when in, March, what was your personal story of when you realized that jazz was going to be silent, we were going to enter into a whole new world?
I mean, I had been following what was happening outside of the United States, and actually have friends in Japan and in Italy that had been in lockdown a month before we were. So that reality was it felt really close. You know, it was strange to be so late in New York. So, I mean, I think the first week, what I felt was I was a bit in panic. I have a child, at school. I also teach. There were so many unknowns at the time. My husband got sick with COVID, so it was very stressful. I was not really thinking about the gigs that I was losing. I was more like survival mode. Like, what's happening? There's a virus. No one has the cure for it. All the countries are closing. And what are we going to do about this? So, yeah.
I get it. Yeah, and everybody's going to feel this in a different way. And I guess that was more the bigger question, not lamenting the live music, but more of the fact that all of us have a narrative as to how all of these things started shutting down. So I get it for sure.
Yeah, it was, for me it was stressful because I have a 6-year-old, so basically I had to do childcare, like homeschooling, and then my husband got sick, so it was there were a few very stressful weeks I barely thought about music,
Yeah. I get it. I have children too, I know, and I have special circumstances, and it is, there's just nothing around, And that's the problem with this. There's a part of us as adults that have accumulated in an emotional wall or barrier to certain things, but it's a different story with the youth because they don't. This is confusing.
Yeah.
There's so many levels of this. There's not even the right words for what it is, but it's all of us are in the same game. So you're releasing an album during a global pandemic. Talk to me a little bit about your feelings on that, and just, did that affect your decision? Are you happy that you've done it? Kind of your thoughts on that.
I mean, I think not only I'm releasing an album during a global pandemic, but I'm also releasing an album where there's a lot of social protests and a lot of changes happening in the United States at the moment, and that there's a very intense and hard times, so I've been feeling, it's been kind of mixed feelings, I'm not really celebrating, finally it's done, but also I feel the work that I've done kind of relates a little bit to what's happening right now, because it's all about recognizing the dark past of European countries and also the United States, and how Black people have been oppressed, mistreated, abused, and how this shapes our lives at the moment, So I think there's some it feels like it's appropriate for the time, but it's not that I'm kind of celebrating, because I feel there's so many more important stuff going on at the moment.
Talk to me a little bit about, where you were born and raised and kind of how jazz became your life.
So I was born and raised in Lisbon, Portugal, and I've always been involved in classical music, but at the time, I never thought I would be a professional musician, so I was just kind of doing the stuff, doing music, piano lessons, singing in a choir while I was doing school. And then I went to, I did my undergrad in social work, and it was only at the end of that undergrad period that I entered the jazz school, and that was my last attempt at music. I was kind of feeling very disappointed with the classical world, and I didn't feel I could fit in there. And so when I started learning jazz, it was just kind of I'm just going to try this. And the whole musical world opened for me, and suddenly I was very interested in jazz and improvisation, and it just kind of became my obsession. So after that, I tried to come to the United States, and I did a summer program at Beklee College of Music, and then I moved to Boston where I studied, and I stayed. It's been 15 years.
Talk to me a little bit about musical influences. What jazz artists were you really into that kind of swayed the way you thought about it?
So, when I was growing up, there was one album that I really listened to a lot and I kind of memorized, which was Ella Fitzgerald with Louis Armstrong. But then, once I started, it kind of kept changing. There was the Miles Davis Quintet. There was Hermeto Pascoal. There was Wayne Shorter. And then when I moved to Boston, getting to study with all these amazing musicians who were incredible professionals, so, I studied with Danilo Perez, with Rand Blake, with Dominic Eade, and eventually my first gig was with Greg Osby at the Village Vanguard, so there was, it keeps changing, and I keep discovering amazing musicians and singers that I love. My favorite singers always, Sarah Vaughan was a big influence, Billie Holiday, Carmen McRae, and later Abby Lincoln, Jean Lee. So many.
Yeah, absolutely. So what do you like the best about being a performer?
What I like best about being a performer is to be able to share what I do in private a lot, and just to be able to share another vision of the world, through sound, and to share it with people and to have their ears and attention. It's always an amazing experience. So the situation of sharing and being a community where we are all kind of feeling each other's energy, I think it's the most important for me as a performer.
We are going to get to a point where, COVID-19 is we're going to get to a place where we can perform live. It's going to end. And when that happens, when we do go back and see live music and you perform live, what do you hope we realize about this time away from live music?
I think the place of the situation of live music, as a listener, for example, it's always a situation where I have to be focused, where I'm listening attentively, and where, things that happen in that room, cannot be reproduced. And I really love that aspect of live music. There's something that happens, and then it just stays with you, but you can't really make it happen again. So there's that. And communication through music is really something really magical and really transcendent. And so I don't know, it's just, you only realize it when it's gone, you know, and so I'm hoping that it will be a moment of just kind of peace, you know, and disconnection from the craziness that we're living through, but also connection through other ways. Yeah, I don't know if this makes sense.
I want to ask you this. Everyone has a version or a perception of you, your family, your friends, your fans, but you're the one that's living your life. Who do you think you are?
I'm a woman. I'm a, you know, artist, composer, vocalist, and I don't know, like I that's such a complex question. That's really hard. Basically, I'm Sara. That's who am I, you know, who I am.
Cool. Let me ask you one last question. If you come to Kansas City to perform live, what would one of your live shows be like?
So my live shows, it really depends on the project that I'm presenting. You know, like, for example, for this last project recognition, it's an interdisciplinary project. So this involves moving image, involves film, involves music, involves words and literature, you know, like, so very kind of immersive performance where it's not so much about myself, but it's more about, like, what is the message that the project wants to convey. But if I'm performing, like, for example, with my husband in duo, or if I'm performing with my trio, it's there's a lot of experimentation, you know, there's a lot of improvisation, there's a lot of, I hope, creativity, like different ways of making things and presenting the human voice in my way, you know, which is sometimes, I think, without words, sometimes with words, different languages, and above all, like, kind of interaction between musicians, which is really important for me. Yeah, and where we are all kind of, we all have equal places. It's not that I'm the star of the show. It's more like we are all kind of part of one team, ensemble, and creating something together.
Wonderful. Hey, Sara, thank you for taking some time out for Neon Jazz today. Stay safe, and good luck with everything. Good luck with the new album.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players in Portugal, New York City, Kansas City, Boston, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to Sara for her time, music, and stories. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino in the iTunes Store. Visit neonjazz at youtube.com, and for everything Neon Jazz all the time, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.